So yes, anyway, the topic is, of course, Pink News resorts to ableism. So again, so this is just a quick short one that we just wanted to cover, especially with the topic of today's show. Kind of building off what we talked about in the last show in how Pink News was called out for both resorting to biphobia and also exploiting bisexual content creators. Pink News had another moment where it decided to publish the headline, and I do quote, "Teen morons hurl homophobic abuse at loved up couple as they celebrate their anniversary." End quote. Now, that headline seems to have been changed to "Pathetic teens hurl homophobic abuse at loved up couple as they celebrate their anniversary." Yet, and this was noted by a number of people, the original is still visible when the article is posted to Twitter. There's no editor's note on the original article detailing the change and why it was done and acknowledging that there was an issue and that they're sorry or anything like that. But again, other people have noted the presence of the M-word. Fact is, the first time I saw it, I was actually watching something, I believe it was Merlin I was watching with Adito when I saw it. I don't know if I actually saw the original article and then that was quickly removed from Twitter by the time I made it to my computer. But the moment I saw it, because I was certain it was in the headline, I saw it, I came onto the computer because I remembered a similar case that happened last year. And in that case, they published the headline that stated, quote, "Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion have seriously triggered the Republicans and Carol Baskin with their new video," end quote. That was published in May 2020, and that got immediate backlash. Eventually, the word "triggered" was later changed to "annoyed." So I posted I made a post pointing out the use of the M word. I should really point out the fact that if you go for my older content, the M word was one of my most popular insults from 2011 when I started the channel, probably up to about 2014. That's when I started to phase things out. I started to address my internalized ableism. And you see my language started to change. Because there was just a number of reasons. First of all, just attacking someone with ableism. The people I'm responding to, the bigots, etc., they weren't likely to care. It was only the people who were actually neurodivergent or disabled people on the sidelines. They were the ones likely getting hurt. On top of this, the people I was going after, it wasn't a case of they just lacked the ability to understand what they were talking about. It was the fact that they'd chosen to uphold their prejudice over looking at the evidence and trying to understand the nuance of the topic. They have one of the greatest resources in regards to knowledge, learning, and understanding at their fingertips, and they just completely squandered that. So it just wasn't accurate either. And people pointed it out, and it took me a while, but I did finally get it. And I would like to see other people do the same. It's not a case of I'm here puritanical. You've used this, you can never sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? You can never improve the situation. I do want people to learn from what they're doing, as I have. However, when I'm pointing out the uses of triggered, which sort of trivializes the struggles people with PTSD, including myself, I have been open about the fact that in 2011 I was actually hospitalized due to a panic attack relating to my childhood PTSD. PTSD is fucking serious. It's not a joke. It's not being angry at something, it's not being annoyed, it's not just a slight fluttering. It can be fucking serious. And using it as a joke, even if you think the target is deserved, all that does, again, is it just hurts people with PTSD or other triggers, because people with PTSD aren't the only ones who can be triggered. Sorry.
It's caused a lot of really serious harm as far as triggers go,
Mhm.
because you cannot even disclose to someone that you have a trigger using the word trigger, because then they hear that as, I'm overly sensitive and I think that the world should revolve around me and that anything I don't like should be kept away from me, and I have a thin skin and can't deal with anything. They don't act People these days do not understand what triggers actually are, and it makes it really difficult to talk about. And personally, that's been really difficult for me because I have issues with, for example, I get very startled very easily, and every single person I meet, I have to explain to them, oh, if you approach me from behind, you're going to startle me and you're going to feel bad and you're going to be confused. And my head will basically hit the ceiling. And, I frequently have problems when I'm on the train or something. I won't be paying attention. Occasionally, people will try to talk to me for whatever reason, and I get really startled and they feel really bad. And I don't know how to explain it to them because I don't have that language, because this word has been so stigmatized and so misused. And so it's really serious when people use the word triggered as an insult and as a way to make someone look really petty and self-centered like that.
I mean, like, I'm not gonna lie, there's a reason when I first introduced content warnings to the channel, we were in the midst of, like, Gamergate in the sector community. There's a reason I use the word content and not trigger. And that's because if I used the word trigger, it would have been like chumming the water in, like, piranha infested waters,
It's interesting you say that, because when I use trigger warnings on my channel, I use content warnings now. I initially use trigger warnings specifically to piss off people who don't like the word trigger. And the reason why I changed it to content warnings is because I feel it's more accurate. But initially I used the word triggered specifically to piss people off. My philosophy at the time is, if you're not pissing off Nazis, you're doing something wrong.
You see, the main reason I introduced my content warning was because I was getting ready to come out as trans at the time. I did introduce it in hopes that the people who, like, kind of get offended at that would kind of, like, piss off on their own, like, slowly over time, like a filtration process. But I didn't want to do something so drastic that would immediately get, like, a lot of verbal abuse, etc. And it's sad the fact that that's the way this ableism is so ingrained, that people like me with PTSD are having to make these sort of, like, pragmatic decisions about the language we use, because if we don't, we're the ones who are going to be made to suffer.
There's like, the hostility towards people with PTSD is so bad. Like, there's an entire culture, really common, where if you disclose that you have PTSD in any way, shape, or form, even if you say nothing about actually, needing accommodations or triggers, if you just say you have PTSD and criticize something, you will get piled on by people who will give you lectures about how you can't survive in the real world if you're this sensitive, and will actually lecture you about how this is somehow impeding your access. And you can respond back to them and say, actually, as someone who lives with this every single day, that is not the case, and this is actually how it works. And they'll often accuse you of not being able to deal with the triggers. And, like, I've replied to these people saying, actually, I have been triggered many times and I do deal with it while educating people at the same time. And usually it's just a thing of, I need to step out of the room and calm down for a bit. And, I do deal with this, and they just won't listen, because it goes against their narrative of viewing you as lesser and viewing you as weak and viewing you as, like, contemptible in how you deal with this. Like, they're not actually concerned about your well-being. They're using this idea of you as being a weak and sensitive person to justify abuse. A lot of them seem to believe in this idea of being abusive is going to help you develop a thick skin, which is just not how anything works. It's a whole thing. It's really
By
bad.
the way, just so we clarify for this stream, the expressions touch grass and terminally online are effectively just reskinned versions of the trigger joke. So, like, if you consider yourself on the left and you're using those things, you're not on the left, okay?
It's also just a complete it's really horrible to people who do have difficulty with going outside
Yeah.
for any number of reasons. And it's also just a complete misunderstanding of what the internet has become. At a time, it did make sense to distinguish between real life and online, but now real life is online.
It's just,
Yeah, you cannot sit here and listen to Ethel and I run this show considering the fact that we only have contact online because of the way the world is currently, and say, this is not real life. This has not impacted your real lives in any way, shape, or form. That's ridiculous.
and like look at Trump's election and like Gamergate and how that's all connected. Like, you know, the Gamergate movement just showed us how much online discourse influences larger politics, and we've seen the same with how everything in 2019 in the secular community had a big part to play in setting the scene for everything that's happening across the US and the UK. You know. Yes. Is there anything you'd like to add, Robin? Sorry, I know we're not leaving you very much.
It's all right. The most I can contribute really is I can verify the whole abuse to culture a thicker skin belief, because I went through a lot of that with my family, and it gave me a lot of issues regarding my self-image, self-esteem. And it's just it messed with my head a lot. And it needs to stop. It's not a good thing.
It gets to the point where it's like you feel any time that you set boundaries, you end up telling yourself that you're the bad person. Like it's so constant. It's a form of gaslighting. It's so constant, the narrative, that if you're uncomfortable at all anything, and like you make it known and you ask to be respected and treated like well in a regard, like having that like sense to protect yourself makes you the bad person.
Personally for me, I've had like something I've been thinking about a lot last year, but especially the past couple of months as well, is just how out of touch I've been with my feelings, even though I'm the sort of person who is generally very emotionally aware and also just very sensitive, not in the sense of like overly sensitive, but just like I've always thought of myself as being very in touch with my emotions, but at the same time, like I never really let myself feel bad about things, because I really had it drilled into me that you need to tough up and you need to have a thicker skin, and if you're ever upset by anything, that is a problem with you. And like I think Ethel can back me up on this, that I really am bad at letting myself be bothered by things that I really should be bothered by.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can vouch for that too.
Yeah. Like once Ethel's like, oh, how are you? And I said, oh, I'm a bit annoyed. My mum basically told me that I'm not allowed to be stressed because it inconveniences her. And
it's a whole thing about parenting and responsibility and like,
and you told me she's telling you not to feel. Like, oh yeah, that's a bit of a problem. I probably should think about that.
Grinding people down is like, yeah. And the thing is, like, the whole, you need to get tougher skin is absolute bullshit. It's like, empirically is bullshit, okay? One of the very first things you learn in psychology is the fact that constant anxiety fucking wrecks your immune system. And it makes you, like, a prime target for everything out there. So, it has a physical cost. Like, even excluding, like, panic attacks, etc., constantly being in situations that cause you anxiety because you can't escape depictions of sexual assault or, extreme graphic violence, etc., whatever it is, it has a toll. It has a cost. And no, exposing yourself to that outside of a situation like that with a trained professional who knows how to, help someone who's averse to sight, it's not gonna fucking help. Exposure therapy is a fucking therapy. It's not just exposure. It's amazing how many people think that just because they understand the concept of exposure, they have any right to give a call on it. It's just, yeah.
Exposure therapy is something you can do as a non-therapist in the same way that heart surgery is something you can do as a non-surgeon.
Mm-hmm.
Just, yeah.
It's like you can just aggravate the issue, and that's what usually happens in regards to this. It just aggravates the issue. It's like rubbing salt into a wound again and again and again until the point that it just goes numb. The person just goes numb because that's the survival strategy. They disassociate, and I like. How many people talk about disassociation these days in regards to their emotions? And a large part of that is we have a society which, rather than going, okay, someone sees an injustice here, how do we fix things, goes, okay, someone sees an injustice here, how do we shut that person up? And, it's kind of... I hate to always fucking go back to it, but, like, it always reminds me of, like, the Birmingham letter and the whole, the false justice, which is the lack of tension, versus like the true justice, which is
It was wasn't it the peace?
Sorry, yes, the
negative piece. The negative piece,
which is
that is
the absence of tension, versus the positive piece, which is the presence of justice.
Yes. I mean, we did recently have an experience like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can definitely vouch for the dissociation, because throughout my life, I'd be exposed to pretty intense violence, both physically and emotionally, and no one actually wanted to help me with that. It was always, oh, I don't have the time for this, I don't have the energy for this, I don't want to deal with your mewling, just you go take care of yourself. And I would, as a kid, I was having to try and comfort myself through that without understanding what was going on. And eventually, and then, once it finally got better, instead of being helped to heal through that, I was just ignored. And so I got to the point where I was dissociating so badly that I was, reaching out to touch things in front of me just to remind myself that I was in the real physical world. All it did was make me shut down. And it's no wonder that, for like 4 years after I left high school, I wasn't doing anything with my life, because I was constantly dissociated. You just can't live like that. No. When I did finally start to feel things again last year, I was not prepared for it at all, and it was really difficult. And so, piling abuse onto people is not going to help them make a thicker skin. It's just going to make them shut down. And, refusing support, it's just going to make people shut down. It doesn't make you stronger.
Yeah.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yeah. I don't know why you cut out there.
That is very strange.
Might have been my connection.
That might have been you, Ethel, because I heard him all through that.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. It probably was my end then. Still streaming. Like, oh shit, no. Oh shit, no, the stream is completely reset. I have no idea where we're actually streaming.
Uh-oh.
It still shows we're on.
The stream looks fine on my end.
Okay.
Oh, the channel cut out for Umbral.
This refreshing seems to have resolved the issue. Still streaming. Yeah, okay. It got me saying still streaming. I think we cut out there for a second and it's come back now. People like Umbral, she says it appears fine now. So okay, I think sorry about that, people. I think my internet just cut out for a second.
The choice.
The joys of tech
Okay.
support.
So I cut out just as
It just shuts you down. Yeah.
What was it? I said a lot of things there.
It wasn't. You talked about your own experience. You talked about like your experience with your mother and all that. And you said like refusing people support, punishing them.
Oh, okay. Okay, that was basically the gist of it. I think I basically said that just piling abuse onto people, it doesn't make them stronger. It just shuts them down and makes them turn themselves into a really poor facsimile of a robot. So yeah, it sounds like the majority of that got through, which is a relief.
It was just the last couple of sentences.
Oh,
but
thank God.
Bringing this back to Pink News before we go on to our final story, like there's a difference between me back in 2011 to 2014 and an official fucking organization which centers on LGBT plus news stories, support, etc. Because again, this isn't the first time this has happened. They've been called out for ableism before. The moment that happened the first time, they should have educated themselves. Okay, we've got an issue here. We've got oversight. We don't. Oversight, is that the right word? Like,
yeah, I think so.
We don't know like how to handle this. We should educate ourselves. Look at like common forms of ableism, etc. That's what editors should have done in that situation, and that doesn't seem to have happened. They've just continued to go ahead. They seem to be operating on the basis of we'll only do stuff when we're called out, which is just negligent for any like news group or even individual. You should push yourself to learn stuff. You should push yourself to like cover all your bases. I remember a big part of why I picked race and racism in my final year university is because I realized, holy shit, all of the modules I've covered have like covered almost every other protected category. In the UK, I haven't done a module on race and racism. That's why I did it, because I wanted to at least learn enough that I could be better in what I was doing on.
Okay, I'll see if I refresh it, if that fixes it.
I'm sorry about that.
Stream looks fine now, and I'm hearing you fine.
I don't know if my flatmate is doing anything that's potentially choking the internet. I was just pointing out the fact that it's especially important for an LGBT plus website to know this stuff, because there is a high prevalence of neurodivergence in the LGBT plus community, so to fail to account for that is just purely negligent,
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm guessing that's kind of what I wanted to say on that.